The morning sun barely pierced through the smog hanging over the Bronx as Maria Delgado stepped off the bus at 5:47 a.m. Her worn sneakers hit the cracked pavement with the same tired rhythm they had for the past 15 years. At 48, her hands told stories her mouth never would. Calluses from scrubbing floors, burns from rushed cooking, and the permanent indent on her ring finger where a wedding band once sat before her husband's factory accident took him away. She clutched a faded photograph in her coat pocket. Her daughter, Sophia, smiled back at her from frozen time. 16 years old, holding her acceptance letter to NYU. That letter had arrived 3 months ago, along with a tuition bill that might as well have been written in millions. Maria had 3 jobs now. The diner from 6 to noon, the office building cleaning crew from 1 to 6, and now this. A live-in nanny position in Manhattan's Upper East Side. The address alone made her hands shake. 840 Fifth Avenue. She had looked it up on the library computer. The building overlooked Central Park, where apartments sold for more money than her entire neighborhood would see in a lifetime. Maria transferred to the subway, her reflection in the dark window showing a woman who looked older than her years. She had ironed her best blouse the night before, the cream-colored one without stains, and borrowed a blazer from her neighbor Rosa. Still, she felt like an imposter. The doorman at 840 Fifth Avenue looked at her as if she had crawled out from the subway grate. His eyes scanned her from head to toe, lingering on her discount store shoes and the small suitcase with the broken wheel. "Where's the service entrance?" he said without preamble, not even a question, just a statement of where he believed she belonged. Maria swallowed the familiar taste of humiliation. Mr. Ashford's assistant said to come to the main entrance. "I'm the new nanny." The doorman's laugh was sharp and cold. "Of course you are." He picked up the phone with exaggerated slowness, speaking into it while staring at her. "Yeah, I got someone here claiming to be staff. Should I send her around back or what?" Whatever response he received made his smirk falter slightly, but he recovered quickly. 23rd floor. Service elevator is through there." He jerked his thumb toward a narrow hallway without meeting her eyes again. The service elevator smelled like industrial cleaner and moved with grinding reluctance. Maria checked her reflection in the polished metal, smoothing her hair one more time. She thought of Sophia, of the tuition payment due in 2 weeks, of why she was here. The elevator doors opened to reveal a kitchen larger than Maria's entire apartment. Marble countertops stretched endlessly, reflecting the morning light streaming through windows that framed Central Park like a living painting. A woman in her 30s stood there, blonde hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face, wearing what Maria recognized as designer clothing even though she couldn't name the brand. "You must be the nanny," the woman said, her tone making the words sound like an accusation. "I'm Victoria Ashford, Mr. Ashford's sister-in-law." She looked Maria up and down with the same dismissive sweep as the doorman. "I'll be frank with you. My brother-in-law is making a mistake. He needs someone qualified, educated, someone who understands the demands of raising a child in this world. Not some. She's exactly who I asked for." A deep voice cut through the kitchen. Alexander Ashford entered the room, and Maria recognized him immediately from the photos Sophia had shown her on her phone. The tech billionaire who had revolutionized cloud computing before he turned 30. He was younger than she expected, maybe 40, with dark hair graying at the temples and eyes that carried a weight she recognized: grief. "Mr. Ashford," Victoria continued, her voice honey-sweet now, "I really think we should discuss. We've discussed enough, Victoria." He turned to Maria, and she saw something in his expression soften. "You're Maria Delgado?" "Yes, sir. My assistant spoke highly of your references. 20 years of childcare experience," she said. 15, Maria corrected quietly, then worried she shouldn't have. "But yes, sir. I've cared for many children." Victoria scoffed. "In the Bronx, I'm sure. This is slightly different, dear. We're talking about preparing a child for Dalton, for Yale, for society. Not just keeping them fed and alive." Maria felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. "Children need love before they need Yale, ma'am. Everything else comes after." The silence that followed felt crushing until Alexander Ashford did something unexpected. He smiled. It was small, sad, but genuine. That's exactly right, Miss Delgado. Victoria, I think we're done here. But Alexander, I said we're done. Victoria left with clicking heels that sounded like gunfire on the marble floors. Alexander gestured for Maria to follow him down a hallway lined with art that probably cost more than her neighborhood's annual budget. They reached a bedroom door painted soft blue, decorated with hand-drawn stars. Alexander's hand hesitated on the doorknob. My son, Christopher, he's 7. He hasn't spoken since his mother died 6 months ago. The doctors say there's nothing physically wrong. He just won't talk. Every nanny we've hired has quit within 2 weeks. Maria's heart clenched. I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Ashford. He nodded without looking at her, then opened the door. The room was immaculate, filled with expensive toys still in their packaging, shelves of unread books, a gaming system with its controllers untouched. And in the corner, curled up in a window seat overlooking Central Park, sat a small boy with dark hair and his father's eyes. Christopher, Alexander said softly, this is Miss Maria. She's going to be staying with us. The boy didn't move, didn't acknowledge them. His gaze remained fixed on something far beyond the glass. Alexander's jaw tightened. I'll leave you to get settled. Your room is next door. If you need anything, the staff can help. He paused at the doorway. Most nannies try to force him to talk. I'd appreciate it if you didn't. After he left, Maria approached slowly, the way she'd approach a wounded bird. She didn't speak, didn't demand attention. She simply sat on the floor near the window seat and began unpacking the small bag she'd brought. A thermos, some yarn, knitting needles. The click of the needles filled the silence. Minutes passed, then an hour. Christopher's eyes flickered toward her once, then back to the window. By lunchtime, a uniformed staff member brought a tray, grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, everything precisely arranged. Christopher didn't touch it. Over the next 3 days, the pattern repeated. Maria would sit nearby, knitting, humming softly, never pushing. The other staff watched with barely concealed amusement. The housekeepers whispered in Spanish. Not knowing Maria understood every word. She won't last a week, they said. The boy is broken. Nothing reaches him. Victoria returned on the 4th day, sweeping into the penthouse with 2 impeccably dressed women. These are my friends from the charity board, she announced loudly. I wanted them to see how we're managing dear Christopher's situation. They found Maria in the playroom, still knitting, while Christopher remained motionless on his window seat. Oh my, one of Victoria's friends whispered, not quietly enough. Is that the help? She looks like she just got off a cleaning shift. Victoria's laugh was crystalline and cruel. That's because she probably did. Alexander insisted on hiring her despite having no proper credentials. She leaned closer to her friends but spoke at full volume. Between you and me, I think he's lost his judgment since Catherine died. Hiring someone like this for Christopher? It's almost negligent. Maria's hands stilled on her knitting. She felt the familiar burn of shame, the same feeling she'd carried her whole life, being looked through, talked over, dismissed as if her humanity was negotiable. But then something happened, something small but seismic. Christopher's head turned, not toward his aunt, toward Maria. His eyes, vacant for days, suddenly focused with an intensity that made her breath catch. Christopher slid off the window seat, his small feet silent on the plush carpet. Victoria was still talking, her voice a cascade of condescension, but Maria couldn't hear the words anymore. All she saw was this boy, this silent boy, walking toward her with purpose for the first time since she'd arrived. He stopped directly in front of Maria, his small hand reaching out. Not to her, but to the knitting in her lap. His fingers traced the pattern she'd been working on. A small blue blanket with yellow stars. Maria's throat tightened. My daughter, she said softly, ignoring Victoria's continued commentary. She loved stars when she was your age. I would make her blankets just like this. She would wrap herself up and tell me she was flying through space. Christopher's fingers stilled. His eyes lifted to meet hers, and in them, she saw something crack open. A dam about to break. Victoria finally noticed the silence. Christopher, what are you? The boy's hand moved from the blanket to Maria's weathered palm. He held it, studying the calluses, the burn marks, the years of work etched into her skin. Then he did something that made Victoria gasp and Maria's eyes flood with tears. He pressed her hand against his cheek and closed his eyes. Maria didn't move, barely breathed. She just let him hold her hand, let him feel whatever he needed to feel. When he finally opened his eyes again, there was something different there. A flicker of life returning. Victoria recovered her composure quickly, her voice sharp. "Christopher, darling, come to Auntie. Let's not bother the help." He shook his head. Small, definite. The first communication he'd made in 6 months. If you're watching this and your heart just broke a little, you're not alone. Sometimes the smallest gestures carry the biggest weight. If you want to see where this story goes, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next? Nobody saw it coming. Victoria left in a storm of clicking heels and barely contained fury. The other staff members watched from doorways. Their expressions shifted from mockery to something closer to wonder. Maria remained on the floor, Christopher's hand still in hers, afraid that moving might shatter whatever fragile connection had formed. That evening, when Alexander returned from his office, he found them in the same spot. Christopher was curled against Maria's side while she hummed a Spanish lullaby, the blue and yellow blanket draped across both of them. Alexander stopped in the doorway, his phone forgotten in his hand. "Miss Delgado?" Maria looked up, worried she'd done something wrong. "Yes, sir?" His voice cracked. "He's never let anyone touch him since Catherine died." "How did you?" "I didn't do anything special, Mr. Ashford. I just sat with him. Sometimes that's all anyone needs. Someone who will just sit with them in their pain." Alexander's eyes were wet. He nodded once, unable to speak, and quietly left the room. 2 weeks later, Christopher spoke his first word. It happened during breakfast while Maria was preparing his oatmeal the way he'd indicated he liked it, with cinnamon and sliced bananas arranged in a smile. She set the bowl in front of him, and he looked up at her with those serious dark eyes. "Thank you." His voice was small, rusty from disuse, but it was there. Maria's hand flew to her mouth. The chef dropped a pan. Even the stoic butler paused in the doorway. "You're welcome, sweetheart," Maria whispered, tears streaming down her face. By the end of the month, Christopher was speaking in full sentences. He followed Maria everywhere, to the kitchen where she'd sneak him extra cookies, to the laundry room where she taught him to fold towels, to the small desk in her modest room where she'd show him pictures of Sophia and tell him stories about the Bronx. Alexander watched this transformation with something between gratitude and grief. He'd thrown himself into work after Catherine's death, letting nannies and staff raise his son, because he couldn't bear to see his wife's eyes looking back at him from Christopher's face. But Maria was changing that too. "Mr. Ashford," she said one evening after Christopher was asleep, "your son needs you. Not your money, not this apartment, not the staff. You." Alexander's defenses rose. "You don't understand." "I understand grief," she interrupted gently. "I understand losing the person you built your life around. But Christopher didn't just lose his mother. He's losing his father too, piece by piece. Every day you hide in that office." The words hung between them like a challenge. Alexander's first instinct was anger. How dare this woman, this nanny from the Bronx, tell him how to parent? But then he saw her face, saw the compassion there, saw someone who'd survived her own devastation and came out still capable of caring. The next morning, Alexander didn't go to the office. He sat at breakfast with Christopher, awkward and uncertain. Christopher stared at him, then at Maria. "It's okay," she encouraged. "Tell your papa about the book we read yesterday." Slowly, haltingly, Christopher began to talk. Alexander listened, really listened, and something frozen inside him began to thaw. But Victoria wasn't finished. She'd been making calls, pulling strings, gathering ammunition. 3 months after Maria arrived, she showed up with a man in an expensive suit and a badge. "Mr. Ashford," the man said, "I'm with Child Protective Services. We've received a complaint about the welfare of your son. Something about an unqualified caregiver with a potentially undocumented immigration status." Maria's blood ran cold. Alexander's face went white with rage. That's a lie, Alexander said through clenched teeth. Miss Delgado has every legal right to work here. Victoria, what have you done? Victoria's smile was poisonous. I'm protecting this family, Alexander. From her. Alexander pulled out his phone, his hands shaking with fury. I want my lawyers here now. All of them. And I want a formal complaint filed against whoever filed this fraudulent report. The CPS agent raised his hands. Mr. Ashford, I'm just doing my job. I need to speak with the child and verify the caregiver's credentials. Fine. Maria, please get your documents. Christopher, come here. But Christopher didn't go to his father. He ran to Maria, wrapping his arms around her waist, his face pressed against her side. Don't take her away, he said, his voice small but clear. Please don't take my Maria away. The agent's expression softened. Son, nobody's taking anyone away. I just need to ask some questions. Victoria stepped forward, her voice dripping false concern. Christopher, darling, you don't understand what's happening. Yes, I do, Christopher said, turning to face his aunt. His voice grew stronger. You're mean to Maria. You're always mean to her. Mommy wouldn't like it. The room fell silent. Victoria's face drained of color. Catherine always said you were jealous, Alexander said quietly, his voice like ice. Jealous of her happiness, her marriage, her son. I defended you. I made excuses. But this? He gestured at the CPS agent. This is unforgivable. Within an hour, Maria's documents were verified, every single one legitimate. The agent apologized profusely and left. Alexander's legal team arrived, already preparing restraining orders and defamation suits. Victoria tried one last desperate play. Alexander, I'm family. Catherine was my sister. You can't seriously choose some random nanny over. She's not random, Christopher said, his small voice cutting through everything. She's not just a nanny. She's the one who came back. Everyone turned to look at him. Alexander knelt down. What do you mean, buddy? Christopher's eyes filled with tears. After Mommy died, everyone kept leaving. All the nannies left. You left too, Daddy. You were here, but you left. But Maria came back every morning. Even when Aunt Victoria was mean. Even when I wouldn't talk. She came back. Alexander pulled his son into his arms, his own tears finally falling. I'm sorry, Christopher. I'm so sorry. I'm here now. I'm not leaving anymore. Maria turned away, trying to give them privacy, but Alexander's voice stopped her. Miss Delgado. Maria. He stood, still holding Christopher. You gave me my son back. You gave him his voice. How do I even begin to thank you for that? Maria wiped her eyes. You just did, Mr. Ashford. No, he said firmly. That's not enough. What do you need? Name it. Anything. Maria thought of Sophia, of the tuition bill, but the words wouldn't come. I just need to keep doing my job, sir. That's all. Christopher wriggled out of his father's arms and took Maria's hand. Daddy, can Maria stay forever? Alexander looked at Maria, really looked at her, seeing not a nanny but the woman who'd saved his family. I hope she will. 3 years later, the autumn sun painted Central Park in shades of gold and crimson. Maria stood at the window of the penthouse, the same window where she'd first seen Christopher curled up in silence, and smiled at how much had changed. Sophia's graduation photo sat on the mantel now, her NYU diploma prominent in the frame. Alexander had insisted on paying her tuition, not as charity, he'd said firmly, but as family helping family. Sophia was starting her master's program in social work next semester, inspired by her mother's compassion. The front door burst open with familiar energy. Mom, I'm home, Christopher called out, his voice bright and strong. He was 10 now, thriving at Dalton, but still insisted on coming straight to Maria after school. Mom. The word still made her heart swell every time. It had started naturally, organically, about a year after Victoria's banishment from their lives. Christopher had slipped one morning at breakfast, and Alexander had simply smiled and said nothing. By dinner, he was saying it too. How was school, mijo? Maria asked, switching to the Spanish that Christopher now spoke fluently. Amazing. I got an A on my presentation about immigration stories. I told them about you, about Abuela Sofia, about how you built everything from nothing. Alexander appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie. He worked from home 3 days a week now, never missing dinner, never missing the moments that mattered. He caught Maria's eye and smiled. That same sad smile from 3 years ago, but warmer now, healing. There's something we need to talk about, he said, gesturing them to the living room. Maria's stomach tightened with old instincts, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Christopher just grinned like he knew a secret. Alexander pulled out a folder, his hands slightly shaking. Maria, you've been with us for 3 years. You've become more than Christopher's nanny. You've become the heart of this home. And we want to make it official. He opened the folder, revealing legal documents. I'm asking if you'll let me adopt Sophia as my daughter, and if you'll adopt Christopher as your son. Legally, permanently, as family. Maria's hands flew to her mouth, tears already falling. Mr. Ashford, I can't. It's Alexander. It's been Alexander for 2 years, but you still won't say it. He smiled gently. And yes, you can. We've already spoken to Sophia. She said yes immediately. Now we just need you to say yes too. Christopher took her hand, squeezing tight. Please say yes, Mom. I want it to be real. I want everyone to know you're my mom. Maria looked at this boy who'd been silent and broken, now whole and laughing. She looked at this man who'd been drowning in grief, now living again. She thought of the doorman who'd sneered at her worn shoes, of Victoria who'd called her unqualified, of everyone who'd looked through her like she was invisible. They hadn't seen her, but this boy had. This family had. Yes, she whispered. Yes, mi amor. Yes to everything. Christopher threw his arms around her, and Alexander joined them, and in that moment Maria Delgado, who'd scrubbed floors and served coffee and been invisible her whole life, became exactly what she'd always been. Essential, irreplaceable, loved.